The grotesque and the mundane. Now, which is worse? The grotesque becoming mundane or the mundane becoming grotesque? I would argue that in Lovecraft we have mostly the grotesque which seems presented as mundane versus, for example, Shirley Jackson, where you have the mundane which is sort of whipped up into the grotesque. So the poem we have today will appear in three separate playlists: the poetry discussion playlist, now nearing 600 videos, the H.P. Lovecraft playlist, as well as the National Horror or the Horror Fest 2024 playlist, a playlist of 31 videos of horror related content for the 31 days of October 2024. The poem in question today, Halloween in a Suburb by H.P. Lovecraft, and it reads as such. The steeples are white in the wild moonlight, and the trees have a silver glare. Past the chimneys high see the vampires fly, and the harpies of upper air, that flutter and laugh and stare. For the village dead to the moon outspread never shone in the sunset's gleam, but grew out of the deep that the dead years keep, where the rivers of madness stream down the gulfs to a pit of dream. A chill wind blows through the rows of sheaves in the meadows that shimmer pale, and comes to twine where the headstones shine, and the ghouls of the churchyard wail for harvests that fly and fail. Not a breath of the strange gray gods of change that tore from the past its own can quicken this hour when the spectral power spreads sleep over this cosmic throne and loosens the vast unknown. So here again stretch the veil and plain. The moon's long forgotten saw, and the dead leap gay in the pallid ray sprung out of the tomb's black maw to shake all the world with awe. And all that mourn shall greet forlorn the ugliness and the pest of rows where thick rise the stones, and brick shall someday be with the rest, and brood with the shades unblessed. Then wild in the dark let the lemurs bark, and all the leprous spires ascend, for new and old alike in the fold of horror and death are pinned, for the hounds of time to rend. Now, this poem was published originally in 1926 under the title In a Suburb. It was published in the National Amateur. And I actually like that title better than Halloween in a Suburb, because I think what it does when you call this poem In a Suburb, it puts the emphasis on the macabre in this poem, contrasting that macabre with the suburb, versus when you say Halloween in a Suburb, it essentially puts all of the emphasis on the Halloween part of the equation. Now, this poem was republished in 1943 in Arkham House. It was published again in 1952 in Weird Tales. Now, you'll notice something about those numbers. 26 to 43 is not quite 20 years. 43 to 52, not quite 10 years. You could say very easily, if you wanted to, that within a lifetime, that's not quite 10 years, not quite a generation, but for all intents and purposes, it is. If you are talking about when Halloween is a big deal to someone, when is Halloween a big deal to someone? 8 years old, 9 years old. Now, take yourself back to the 1940s, the 1920s, the 1950s. When are you having children? You're having children 19, 20 years old, probably the norm, 18, 19, 20. So, we have a gap of an entire generation between the time when it is first published in 1926 to when it is republished in 1943. And it's easy to say that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Who cares if this poem was published and then republished? Except, guys, publication used to be the big thing. This is sort of like a movie being re-released. This is sort of like a special being rerun on television. Being published and republished was at the time a very big deal. It's not like some look, I've played the game of publication in today's world where you send your piece off that you labored over for hours to some Canadian journal that has a print run of 150 and no one's ever read it, but now you can't resubmit it anywhere else because it's already been published. It wasn't like that. It was as if it were run on television. So why these skips? Well, I think that what this is it's nostalgia more than anything. I think that what this poem does in a very real and tangible way to people who are investing in it. I think it's easy to read these words and not get anything out of them. But I think that it's also, if you're investing in these words, if you're reading this poem to get something out of it, I think that what this poem does is it treats Halloween, it treats the macabre, it treats the creepy with the type of sincerity that we did when we were children and we thought these things to be real. An easy way, in my opinion, to sort of think about this is Stranger Things. I've never seen Stranger Things. I kind of know what it is. It is a retro show, right? It's about the 80s, and it's about kids in the 80s, made for people who were kids in the 80s. So you look back at those protagonists and you see the sincerity of the macabre in their world and the sincerity with which you treated the macabre in yours. This poem, you look at it. It written, so it is a bit of a head scratcher because you have generational gaps going on as well. It is popular with my generation. I was born in 1985 because it reminds us of childhood, and those are kids in the novel. But the kids are kids in the novel in the 1950s. In the 1980s, where the novel is set, as adults, they're adults. But we still have that connection to the nostalgia of the macabre being treated as real. I think that this is, so with the poem, you're looking at the first gap from 26 to 43 being a generational gap. From 43 to 52 being the gap between I loved Halloween when I was a kid, and this poem really hit me. Let's put it back in. This is interesting because it's the same type of fervor with which children treat something such as Christmas. Because of all of the imagination that is necessary to get into the holiday spirit. Children love Christmas, and it's not just because of the gifts. It's because of all of the lore that surrounds it. Santa Claus, flying reindeer, all of these things kids love to pretend are real. They love to indulge those fantasies the same way that they indulge the fantasies of the macabre. And the nostalgia that we feel when watching a child open gifts on Christmas morning is the same nostalgia we feel through art like this, or Stranger Things, or It. But I think it's a little bit different because you can watch that 5-year-old open gifts on Christmas morning, feel the nostalgia, and fall in love with the moment. But watching a child get scared is very different. So I think that there is a little bit of a disconnect in the two holidays and how they are sort of celebrated. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.